I'd like you to open your Bible to Ezekiel 19. Ezekiel 19. Today's study is going to be on addiction. So I'm going to be giving you a lot of knowledge from from life that I've studied, but also we're going to be looking at the Bible and what I want to liken it to. I want to liken addictions to. Ezekiel 19 and verse 1. Moreover, thou take up a lamentation for the princes of Israel and say, what is thy mother? A lioness. She lay down among lions and she nourished her whelps among young lions. Go to verse 4. He's gonna be the foundation of the study today. The nations also heard of him, Israel. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains unto the land of Egypt. Now, the majority of Bible believers, they will liken Egypt to a type of this world, and I agree with that. But for the purpose of this spiritual lesson I'd like to give you, I'm going to be likening Egypt to your own safe corner, your own dark room that you have. Okay. Now you say, well, what do I mean by that? Well, let's take it step by step. I want you to notice in the passage that Israel is being taken with chains unto the land of Egypt. I first would like to let you know that addiction is not something that you are unable to be subjected to, even if you're born again. You can easily become addicted to something. Now, what exactly is an addiction? People simply say, well, if a person drinks a lot of wine, that makes them an addict. But there's different phases of an alcohol addict, right? An alcohol addict is first alcohol dependent. But if they get to a point where they are just gouging it and just having it to have it, then they're a full-blown addict, right? But either way, both permutations are negative. You shouldn't be alcohol dependent. But if you're an addict, those are those people that you see that they get like their legs amputated and stuff because they just drink themselves blue, right? And I've seen it. So I know what's going on. But what exactly is an addiction at its core? I'm just giving you some time to think about it. Because you see, an addiction, we separate as humans into categories of addictions. But at the root of it all, every addiction comes down to one addiction. You say, well, what does that mean? Every addiction at its core is a form of gambling. When we think of addiction, we think of, well, that guy is a alcohol addict. We say, well, that guy is a gambler. He's addicted to gambling money. When we think of another addict, we think of, oh, that guy is a sexual addict. I don't want to get the video taken down, but you understand what I'm trying to say, right? Oh, that guy is a video game addict. All he does is play video games. He doesn't leave his room. He's a neat, right? Now, all of those addictions, they're all the same problem. So, what is the problem? The Lord spake in the Ten Commandments. He said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. The thing about us is that when we think of addictions, we're separating them into categories and saying, well, alcohol is that addiction, but that one isn't really anything like gambling or sexual stuff in nature or video games. How could any of those things be related? Yeah, but the thing is that they're all the same at its core. You see, there are some people that when they are struggling with a particular addiction, they will do things like put a blocker on their phone. They will do things like filter out what kind of stuff they have access to prevent themselves from being taken in by that stuff. Solomon says in Proverbs 23, for the alcohol addict, just don't even look at the wine. When you look at it, you're going to taste it, right? Because that's how much your sight is tied to your senses. Now, Solomon's advice is good advice, but I want you to consider something that in your life, if you have any type of addiction, whether very big or very tiny, subtle addictions, what you are doing is you are gambling with God. That's the problem. You are gambling with God. Now, when you think of gambling, you're thinking money. Because if you're an American, you hear the word gamble, and your first um, inclination is to assume I'm talking about money. But any form of an addiction is gambling. You're just gambling different things at different levels. If you were a financial gambler, then you are gambling financial blessings from God, and you're hoping that God will bless you through that. If you were an alcohol addict, you are gambling your life. If you were a video game addict, you are gambling your time. If you were a sexual addict, again, you know what I'm talking about. If you were an addict in that regard, you are gambling your what? Your innocency. You see that? Every form of an addiction is a type of gambling. Every form of it. Now, that's so important because when you are dealing with a sin problem, when you have a problem in your life, you have to sit down and think about, okay, I can have the blocker. I don't think there's anything wrong with using a blocker to keep yourself from evil. You can have these different steps to prevent yourself from getting a trigger on that thing you used to mess with. But I want you to consider something. What is the heart? What is the root of the issue that you are even privy to those temptations, or that the addict is even privy to that addiction? You understand what I'm getting at? You see, a person may be a financial gambler, but he can do all these different things to limit himself from having access to that. But what's stopping the gambler from just disabling the thing that's stopping him from getting access to the casinos and the phone apps and stuff? Right? He can just get in the flesh one day, that Christian, if he had an issue with gambling, he can get in the flesh one day and just decide to disable the apps that's blocking the problem, and then he can mess with sin. So when we think of an addiction, we only think of it in terms of, well, that guy is addicted to that problem. But what is the root of the problem? Well, first of all, you're gambling with God. So here's the 3 phases of addiction. The first phase of addiction that you need to understand is that it is a form of gambling. You are gambling something away. Gambling does not always mean I'm talking about money, although money is just, the biggest example, right? The second phase of addiction is that it always begins with tempting God in a positive manner. You say, what? What does it mean in a positive manner? Well, like I said, the Lord said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. But every temptation, it appears as a positive motive. What do I mean by that? Go to Genesis. Let's look at the first temptation. Go to Genesis chapter 3. Go to Genesis chapter 3. Let me show you what I mean. Genesis chapter 3. In verse 1, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God hath made. And he said unto the woman, yea, hath not God said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The first word that the devil spoke was yes. The temptation to Eve was positive. And so what happens is that the person who's tempting God with whatever his addictive problem is always deceives himself into believing that it's for some good. Now you say, no, that's not true, brother. Of course it's true. Let me give you an example. Anybody that's addicted to prawn, you know how they get started on doing that? They say, well, I'm just relieving myself, to keep myself in control. And then they look up all these stupid tabloid articles that tell you that if you pleasure yourself, I'm being a little less crude, but if you pleasure yourself, that actually has health benefits. And then they justify it for a positive reason. Say, well, I'm just doing it for my health. Now you say, nobody thinks that way. You're naive. I can show you so many articles, so many tabloid articles. They're everywhere because the world will justify sin. Every gambler, especially Christian gamblers, they always start off saying, well, Lord, I know I technically shouldn't be gambling away the money you gave me, but if I get that $1 million, I'll give to the ministry. I'll do this and that with the money. It's a positive reason. But why shouldn't he do it? Because God told him not to do it. Now you say, well, what's the big deal with the alcohol addict? What's so positive about drinking alcohol? Nothing. But the alcohol addict says, well, I'm just doing it to calm myself down. You wouldn't want to see me when I'm not calm. You wouldn't want to see me in a bad state. Let me just drink a couple sips so I can relax. It's a positive reason. Because in Genesis, yea, have God said? It's positive. So every addiction always begins with a positive temptation of God. Always. Always. Now, the way the devil gets it's subtle, right? What if the addiction isn't for a positive reason? What if it isn't for some self-justification? Well, the third phase of addiction is going to be that it's born from escapism. Escapism. Every addiction at its core, the goal is to run away from the core problem. It's always a matter of the heart, you understand? Every issue you have in your life, not even just this topic, but every issue you have in your life that you're struggling with, it's a matter of the heart. I live in a generation that loves to be depressed. They are addicted to feeling bad about themselves. That's my generation. We have a saying, misery loves company. Some people love to be miserable. They love it. They love to feel bad about themselves. You know why they love to feel bad about themselves? They love to feel bad about themselves because they can use the negativity to attract pity and attention with no intention to solve the problem. I grew up in a time where I encountered many people who were severely injured. These are people who have actual medical problems. But you know what? Those people who have those medical problems, and I've seen it so many times, where they could have treated the problem, maybe not cured it, but they could have relieved the problem. And you know what that person did? Those people refused to actually address the medical problem that they had because they loved the attention of being taken in and being felt bad about, and all the attention from people who were like, oh, I feel so bad for you because you have this medical issue, with no intention to solve the problem when the solution is readily available. Seriously. This is a common thing on the internet. I know the four corners of the internet. If you're disagreeing right now, there's nothing for you to disagree with. I've seen it. My generation messes with this all the time. And now you go online, everybody has a mental problem. Everybody. They all have some, oh, I have ADHD. America has ADHD. Right? You can't fool me. I've seen it all. The internet creates vacuums of fake identities, and people can just, oh, well, I have this medical problem. Oh, well, I have this disease. And they may have those problems, but they will never solve them. Because once they get over that hump, once they cure that disease or they overcome that psychological problem that they have, they overcome that addiction, there's no more pity. There's no more attention. No one's going to be there to, quote unquote, comfort them. You know what that is? It's escapism. It's a form of escapism. Every addiction is either some form of tempting God with a positive manner, or it's born from an addiction that comes from escapism. You're running from a problem, and the addiction is a way for you to forget about your problem. You see that? So, why did I start this study with Ezekiel 19? I'd like you to go back to Ezekiel chapter 19. I'd like you for you to just look at that verse real quick. Now, this verse has absolutely nothing to do with the topic, but I'm just trying to apply something mentally for you, okay? In verse 4, it says, the nations also heard of him, Israel. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains unto the land of Egypt. What is the Bible saying here? That Israel wasn't just taken to the land of Egypt, they were brought with chains. So the spiritual word I'd like you to focus on today are chains. Now, in the beginning, I said that instead of thinking of Egypt as a type of this world, I want you to think of Egypt as the old life, the secrets that you have in the dark corner. And what you have here is that Israel was called out of Egypt. They were called out of that old life in bondage. But God is telling you here that Egypt was going to be brought with chains back into the land of Egypt. And what you often find with the addict is that when they are called out of that world, when a Christian is called out of that life, What ends up happening is they are quickly taken in by the devil if they don't grow. And if that Christian refuses to grow, the devil will take them back to Egypt, back to their old life. But this time, when he takes them back in chains. And what is the purpose of a chain? To hold you down. Now, when you think of chains, you're thinking of just the metal beams that are tied together in the locks. But chains also accompanied metal balls that would hold you down in place. So when the person goes back to Egypt, after God took them out of Egypt, they're brought back even worse under bondage than they were the first time. You see that? That was Israel's problem. I want you to understand. Israel was the same thing. They were called out of Egypt, but when they went back into captivity, they were made the worse. And you see that with the apostasy if you read any of the Old Testament. But who reads the Old Testament? Right? So I'd like you to look at another verse real quick. Lamentations chapter 3. Lamentations chapter 3. Again, these verses have nothing to do with this, but I'm just trying to apply something to you so you can get an image, right? Verse 6, he hath set me in dark places as they that be dead of old. He hath hedged me about that I cannot get out. He hath made my chain heavy. Well, again, a chain is a ball chain. It holds you down, right? Go to Jeremiah 52. Here's another one. Jeremiah 52. What did the Babylon king do to Zedekiah? Verse 11. Then he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him in chains and carried him to Babylon. Now, this is a very unique verse, because in the verse it's saying that when Nebuchadnezzar came to Zedekiah, he first put his eyes out. And then he put him in chains and took him back to Babylon. So let's liken Egypt and Babylon as the dark world that you used to live in, as that old world, that old life you used to be in. Let's liken these two nations to that. And notice the first thing that happened to Zedekiah before he was taken in chains is his eyes were put out. And you know what an addict is like? An addict is like a drunken man stumbling in the dark. And so not only is this man taken back to his Babylon, his Egypt, in chains, his eyes are put out and he can't see. Zedekiah, as Israel, became blind. The Bible calls it the blindness of Israel. Zedekiah here, he's blinded. So he's blinded and taken back into Babylon in chains. And an addict, that's all an addict is. He's a blind man that can't see his problem, and he's back in chains in the life he used to live. But this time, it's harder for him to get out because he can't see where he's going. Now look at another verse. Isaiah 30. Now, Isaiah 30, we're going to go to here, but we're not going to read it just yet. I want to start giving you something to understand. This study, actually, I wasn't going to do this Bible study. I was planning on working on this a little bit more, but this was actually a request I was given to do this study on this topic, because a lot of Christians, when you get deep in the Bible and you start getting right with God, you start thinking, well, I'm not an alcohol addict, I'm not a gambling addict, I'm not a this and that addict, and you start to get a little haughty, not on purpose. You are doing the right thing. But what happens is that the devil starts to put subtle things that you should not be addicted to. I actually want to start going through the process of how does someone actually become an addict. Earlier, I gave you the phases of addiction, what compromises, what composes of an addiction, what is it comprised of. But I actually want to show you the mindset of how a person becomes an addict. So first, what does it begin with? Well, the addict usually has a genuine problem. Most people aren't just addicted for no reason. Okay, it doesn't just turn out that way, right? It first begins with a sense of defeatism. Now, what is defeatism? Defeatism is the mentality that you can never overcome. Okay, that's defeatism. I know defeatism very well. I grew up dealing with a lot of Japanese people. The Japanese people, as a collective, are defeatist. They are nihilistic. Consume any of their music, consume any of their anime, consume any of their video games. It's all defeatist. They never feel like they can overcome anything. And so a lot of their media is power fantasy because the person wants to feel like they can overcome, but they do it through a virtual medium, right? Because in their life, in that country, they're tied in a circle and they're tied in bondage to their jobs. And if they don't if they don't stay in their line, they get ostracized. So many many addictions begin with a type of defeatism. The person has failed to overcome the problem that they have, and so they begin to deceive themselves and they begin to give up very easily. And then what the person does is he says, well, I'll just try this thing, whatever the addiction is. It'll make me feel better. Let me give you an example. Somebody who Bible says it's better to marry than to burn. Well, somebody can't find a wife, and they can't, and they've gone so long without any sexual pleasure. So the person says, well, I'll just pleasure myself one time, just to keep me going until I can get a wife, right? I'll just hold it down until then, right? And was supposed to start as a temporary. So that's it. They've already been defeated. They've now deceived themselves into thinking that the sin is going to actually carry them the whole way until they get what they want. And then they get the temporary relief. But the problem is the core issue of the heart is still there. So what happens is now they've done the sin. They've relieved themselves temporarily. But when the urge comes back, the sexual urge comes back in this case, they now realize they have to do it again because the problem is still there. They have not addressed the problem. You understand? How about the gambling addict? Here's the gambling addict, the financial gambling addict. He's poor. And he says, you know what? One day, if I just roll enough of the dice, I can get out of my poor living conditions. It's all the rich people's fault. All those millionaires, it's all their fault. The bad economy, it's all their fault that I can't I can't make money. And I can go through a conversation and say, yeah, there's things in the world system that make it hard to live and that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure, those things are all true. But then the person says, well, I give up. It's not fair. The world is not fair. I don't make enough money. So let me just take a chance. Hey, I'm not saying I'm going to gamble. I'm just doing it once or twice. And then the person fails. He doesn't win the lottery, obviously. But he did it once or twice. And then he starts to entertain the idea, well, what if? I mean, it's a positive reason. I'll give to the poor. I'll take care of my family with this money. And the person deceives himself with all these false sense of grandeur. What he's going to do with the money when he finally gets it. And then he begins to slowly gamble away his finances, right? And so the person begins to slowly entertain it. And then he says, well, if I give more, maybe there's a higher chance I can get more. So the person begins to gamble it and gamble it and gamble it until the person becomes broke. And then the financial gambler now has to take out loans to make up for the money that he lost. I work with a guy. This guy used to complain to me all the time about his financial problems when I was working I used to work in HVAC. And this guy used to tell me about all the different financial issues he was having, but he was a gambler. And so I sat down one day and I asked myself, and I said, why is it that this guy is spending so much money gambling the way of the money? If he had just saved the money he was gambling, he would have been able to pay off all his financial issues, no problem, in a couple of years. But in his mind, if he could just hit the jackpot, what was he thinking? Well, he explained to me that in his life, he messed up early in his career. So now he's stuck in a dead-end job. And so he's hoping that if he wins the lottery, he can actually bounce back. But had he just saved the money and used that money for a program or something else, because he had good connections, he could have made his way out. But what did he do? He was trying to win the lottery to fix his problems, because the reason he messed up early in his career is because of his own sin problem and because of his own messing around with people that he shouldn't have been. And now he's trying to gamble away for a quick fix to fix the problem. And now the guy's a gambling addict. And you know what the problem is in the end? The problem in the end for the addict is that when he finally gets down to a point, God has him in this little box, right? And the guy is just stuck and he doesn't know what to do. He has two options: remain in his condition or face the problem, face the hard issue. And what do most people choose? To remain in bondage. That's what most people choose. Most people will not face their problem. But again, when you are dealing with an addiction, it's an issue of the heart. You can add all these things to amend the problem temporarily, and those are good things. I'm not saying they're not good things. Having a companion app to block your VPN so that you don't get addicted, those are not bad things. But it doesn't address the problem. There's a heart issue at play. You understand? And so let's look at the book of Isaiah, chapter 30. Look at Isaiah chapter 30. Now, the lost person does not have this rebuke, but the saved Christian has this rebuke. If you are a Christian messing around with sins, pretending to be someone you're not, or having some addictive problem, I want you to consider what God has to say about it. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 1, woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel. Let's stop right there. You know what the addict loves to do? The addict loves to ask everybody for advice that's not God. Right? That's what the Christian addict loves to do. He loves to go to all the people that isn't God to ask for counsel. And even if the counsel is good, they have no intention of doing it. They like to play bingo with God and only show up to him and pick the verses that make them feel good. But he says in this, woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me. They don't ask for God. And that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. That's the addict. So the addict won't take counsel of God. He covers with a covering, but it's the wrong covering. It's his own self-deceived idea of what he thinks should fix the problem, and then he's just more and more of an addict. And God says, but not of my spirit. The person's not covering it with God's spirit. The person's not coming to God to get it done, to get it fixed. That they may add sin to sin. So the person's adding it even more and more. That they may, look, now watch this, that walk down, look, notice how God is saying that walk down into Egypt. Now, geographically, Egypt is down from Israel. But look at it spiritually speaking. If Egypt and Babylon are that old life, those old habits, those old things, and you've now become addicted to those things again, he's saying here that walk down into Egypt. Why? Because you're descending, which is not good. You should be ascending. And have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. It's almost like the addict is in an oasis, and instead of letting God's wings cover them, he's going to the false shadow of Egypt, the false oasis in the middle of the desert. Now, stay here in Isaiah 30 and go to Psalm 91 so you can see what I'm talking about. Psalm 91 and verse 1. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of what? The Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In him will I what? Will I trust? But look what it says in Isaiah. What's the condemnation? He says that these people in verse 2 have not asked at my mouth. They've strengthened themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and they've trusted in the shadow of Egypt. But the blessing in Psalm 91 is someone who's made God his refuge. He's trusted in the Lord and sat under his wings and his shadow. You see that? Therefore, in verse 3 of Isaiah, he says, therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame. When you get addicted to something, you'll feel like you're in control of it for a while. You'll feel like you can manage it. But when you get tired of it and you try to break it, you find out very quickly you can't break it so easy. And that's why it says in verse 3, therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh, the strength of your addiction, shall be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt, your confusion. Because you trusted in the wrong shadow in the desert. You trusted in the wrong oasis. What you thought was your strength, what you thought you could manage, is actually your confusion. And that's why in verse 1, God says, woe to the rebellious children. How is it rebellious? Because what did I say in the beginning? Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. If you even entertain the idea of any type of addiction, you have now tempted the Lord, and the woe is against you. See that? But it's not all negative. It's not all negative. Let's understand, how does one overcome an addiction? Now, let me just first say this by saying some addictions are very tough to overcome. Weed addictions, alcohol addictions. I will admit, if you are deep in the pool, they are tough. You might have to go to one of those, I don't know the name of the programs, where they help you to withdraw, because part of the addiction is that you take in so much that when you go through withdrawal, you go through immense pain. So your body can heal to go back to what it was before you had the addiction, right? And let me just say that maybe, just maybe consider that if the pain is what you're scared of, maybe you need that pain to be reminded of why you should be trusting in the Lord and not messing with stuff like that in the first place. You understand? Whether physical body pain or financial collapse because you've gambled, or mental destruction because you've messed with prawn, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to instruct you on how to address the particular addiction systematically. If you have an alcohol addiction, a really bad one, I would probably recommend you go to one of those centers. Or if you have a weed addiction or a drug addiction, I'd probably recommend you go to one of those centers. That's the practical thing to do. But the practical solution, once again, does not fix the problem. If you are addicted to something that's a heart issue, you need to fix the matter of the heart. But I can't tell you what that is because I'm not you. I don't know what led you to that addiction. You understand? If you have one. Now, if you're a Christian listening that doesn't have an addiction, genuinely, you should be very grateful to God, because these days it's easy to get addicted to anything because sin is so easily accessible at your fingertips, right? So let me just start by saying, at the core of it, let's look at Psalm 17. At the core of it, what is the addict's problem? His problem is he is not satisfied. Psalm 17, verse 15. As for me, I will behold thy face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied. This person will be satisfied. David will be satisfied when he beholds the Lord. The problem for the addict, especially if he's lost because he's not saved, is that he is not satisfied. You see that? And so, considering this, let's understand some things that you should know. And you may agree or not agree, but let's just look at some little details on understanding how to overcome an addiction, spiritually speaking. Go to Exodus chapter 4. Exodus chapter 4. Exodus chapter 4 and verse 3. And he said, cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground. Then it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and he became a rod in his hand. Let's read this passage carefully, guys, okay? When God gives him the rod in verse 2, he told Moses to cast it on the ground. And when Moses did, what did it become? A serpent, right? In verse 3. But look what Moses did. Moses fled from before it. If you are listening today and you are addicted to something, you are fleeing from something. You are fleeing from your serpent. And the problem with you is you have a problem and you're running away. But the first issue in overcoming an addiction is you need to face your fears. You're scared of something. It's okay to admit that you're scared of something. I know these stupid fundamentalist Christians are so pious and they're like, you have to trust in the Lord and you can't fear anything. And they like to quote Proverbs 29:25, the fear of man bringeth a snare. Yes, those things are all true. But I'm talking real, practical Christianity here. It's okay to admit that you're scared of something. The Bible actually doesn't say to be fearless. Jesus does say that there are certain things you should be scared of. He said, fear not him which is able to kill the body, but fear him which can kill and destroy the both body and soul in hell. Jesus told you to fear something. There are healthy fears. You should fear the Lord thy God. But there are things that you shouldn't be scared of that God tells you not to be scared of. He says in the scriptures, fear not, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to deliver thee, referring to Israel. Okay? But we're talking practical Christianity here. You have a personal demon in the closet, and you need to face your fears. It's okay to be scared of something. But now that you've acknowledged that you have that fear, you need to face that fear. And so notice in verse 4, the only way for Moses to have grabbed the tail of the serpent was that he had to turn around and face the serpent as it was running at him. And when the serpent saw that Moses withstood him, the serpent would have turned around and then Moses could grab it by the tail. And so for you to overcome your problem, you need to understand the root of the issue. But for you to understand the root of the issue, you're going to first have to admit that you have a problem. You have to face the thing you fear the most, whatever that is. Now the next step, verse 70, Psalm 73. What's the next step? I say step, but it's not really steps. It's just things for you to consider. Psalm 73. Psalm 73 in verse 5. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride compasseth them about as a what? As a chain. When Zedekiah went down to Babylon, what was his problem? He was a prideful, wicked king. God had to have his eyes put out, and he was brought with chains unto Babylon. Why? He was prideful. All those kings were prideful. So what does it say here in verse 6? I know this context has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I'm just applying it. Pride compasseth them about as a chain. Pride is a chain. The addict is so prideful. He will not admit that he has a problem. And if he admits he has the problem, he won't really admit it 100%. He won't really say what admit and face the issue because he's prideful. And he'll blame the problems and blame the environment and blame his past and blame this and blame that. And he may be absolutely right. But having things to blame does not fix the problem. You can still overcome the problem through Christ. And so it says that pride cometh to them about as a chain. Pride is being likened to a chain. Why? Pride holds you down. Because God resists. Because how does the verse go? God what? Giveth grace unto the humble. But he resisteth the proud. God will resist you. Pride being likened to a chain. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like pride is keeping you in bondage to something. Go to James chapter 4. James chapter 4, verse 8. Now here's something practical. I'm not saying it's easy to overcome an addictive problem. But part of the Christian addict's problem is that he's not getting close to God either. If you're in the process of overcoming an addictive habit that you have, addictive problem, I'm not saying that you're not close to God. But oftentimes, the worst addicts have not even tried to begin their walk with God, and they're living far from Him. So here's a commandment. Verse 8, draw nigh, James 4:8, draw nigh to God, and He will draw nigh to you. That's a promise. If you draw nigh to God and seek Him out from His word and give it time, He will draw nigh to you. Not maybe, He will. So the commandment is cleanse your hands, clean it up, ye sinners, purify your hearts, ye double-minded. The addict is double-minded. Now you've got these pathetic, stupid Christians out here that are doing weed and stuff and medical marijuana and alcohol. And they think they're right with God. And they're living double lives on the internet, trying to act all righteous, and they think they're all this and that. And they're doing everything that they condemn everybody else for doing. I'm not here to do that. This message, random video, isn't actually meant to be a condemnation. It's meant to be an encouragement. If anybody's struggling with anything, draw nigh to God. Are you getting close to God? If you do, the promise is He will come and draw nigh to you. God is always ready to come and help you solve your problems. The issue is, are you ready? Are you ready? So I'll close it out on there. Pray this study was a blessing. I don't know who needed to hear it. It was just a random idea that I had. This is the fastest of addiction. So grace be to you all.